everyone was just, was really quite panicky, and I thought we're going to go down, seeing we're on the rock, we're going to go down before we actually get up on deck.
When the ship hit Barrett's Reef, a mayday was put out and Wellington Radio received it, and so did Beacon Hill. So they were aware of what the problems, that the ship was in trouble. Captain John Brown was the duty pilot for the Wellington Harbour Board, which means he was waiting for a ship to come in or sail that he was going to guide in or out of the harbour.
At about 20 to 7 I heard this call come out from the Waihinei to Beacon Hill, that was the signal station, to say that he had touched Barrett's Reef, and he had let them know if he wanted any assistance, which was quite a dramatic thing for a ship to hit Barrett's Reef.
Captain Brown was one of the few people that day to speak directly to Captain Robertson. The ferry captain told him he'd lost both engines and had dropped both anchors. He hoped Captain Brown could tow him to safety.
The worst thing was the visibility. There was just no visibility at all, and we couldn't really see where the next wave was coming from. This was down about the area where the Waihinei eventually sank. We were in that area, and we had a radar and we could see the Waihinei on the radar down to the south of us, a big blob. But we couldn't see it visually. Captain Robinson kept on saying, well, if I can get a tug, we can get a line up and he can tow me to safety. But I still had doubts about how he was going to tow the Waihinei anywhere, because the Waihinei had 2 anchors down at this stage. We both agreed that he had a lot more water on board than what he had indicated to us by saying everything was under control.
With the pilot alongside the ship, the Deputy Harbour Master David Galloway made an incredible leap on board. The captain had stayed on the bridge watching closely the anchors. They were struggling to hold Waihinei, and Captain Robertson knew that if one cable were to part, the ship would smash onto the rocks. The total loss of life was now a real possibility.
And I believe it was him going on board at that stage. It must have been just after 12 when he got on board. I think he said to Robinson a couple of things about, well, do you really know how serious you are? I think you better go down and have a look. And that may have been the first time that Robinson could get off the bridge and go down to the vehicle deck, where it came out later on that there'd been water in there since about 8 o'clock, but Robinson certainly didn't intimate that to anybody ashore, because we could hear all the messages that were going over the VHF, and he certainly didn't say anything about water on the vehicle deck in any of the messages up till that time.
Why not?
Don't know, and I think that he didn't know.
A few hundred yards offshore, the inter-island ferry Waihinei is drifting helplessly backwards up the harbour. Most of the time it is obscured by driving rain and sleet and spray whipped up off the sea. But a few moments ago it was visible, clearly visible from the shore, and it appeared to be moving slowly backwards towards the rocks a few hundred yards from the shore.
We sat there and waited and just playing like normal kids do. The little fella behind me, we were playing. Well, we didn't know the boat was sinking.
And it took us unawares. It took us, and that's everybody in the area, were completely unawares. You know, 1 minute we were all sitting around chatting away, and there was this buzz going on with people chatting. And then the next instant, the ship gave a lurch, and things went flying off the table. And so there was dead silence.
All the time the sea was just so rough, and then the ship started to have a bit of a list, and it would tip over one way and come back up a bit, and tip over a bit more and come up a bit, and then this one particular time it just tipped right over, and you could hear people falling and screaming and glass breaking and furniture crashing in the lounge next door to where I was standing. It was a terrible noise, terrible.
At 1:20 the tide turned. The ship lurched and Wahine was now in immediate danger of capsizing.
Then I asked one of the crew that I'd been friends with if he'd go back and get Gordy some clothes, and we were on D deck, and the guy went down, he came back and he said, "Sorry Shirley, I can't get into your cabin, it's underwater."
Some people were starting to panic. Man, it's hard to relive it now. Yeah. Boy and I just sat around and we prayed. We spent some time in prayer, and yeah, we thank God for our lives. And we asked him to spare us for our children's sake.
New Zealanders reeling from the storm which had brought devastation across the country were now hearing the news. Wahine, with 734 people on board, was in trouble. But the captain chose to keep those on shore and those on board calm, and few realised just how great the danger was.
We had one transistor radio, somebody had one on in the lounge, and just all the time they were coming over, we'd be in port soon, we were quite safe. But when you looked out the window with waves breaking all over you, I don't think we sort of realised what was going on.
The chair started tipping to the side a bit, and I thought, this is it, it's going over, we're going to have to make a move soon to get off.
Gordy's lying on the life jacket because there wasn't room to have nurse him like that, so he'd be better lying on my knee. He was very much Mum's boy, he wouldn't have gone to anyone else in any case. Keeping the kids quiet, we were singing Morningtown Ride basically, a lot of other ones, but it was my kids' favourite song, I don't know why. We used to sing rock and rollin', riding all across the bay, all bound for Morningtown, many miles away. Sometimes there is sunshine, sometimes there is rain, sometimes there is Morningtown all along the way.
But Shirley was becoming increasingly anxious, as there were no child life jackets for her children.
See how the life jacket covers half of her? It's only a little face showing.
When the tide turned and the ship listed over on its side, all happened quite suddenly.
It was 1:25 on April the 10th that time ran out. Wahine was about to keel over. The captain ordered everyone on board to abandon ship.
The siren went and the awful chilling sound of abandoned ship.
Everybody made a rush for the door, of course. And
when we got on quite a lean, it sort of went like that, and people started to slip away from everybody, and Alma slipped away.
And we all got separated. Alma went one way, Gordon went another.
Fearing that the ship would sink before they could even get off, some passengers jumped in, others slipped and fell into the water.
I put my feet to stop me from the impact, and that's when I broke my ankle, and I ended up in the water.
All the heavy furniture broke loose and came down on top of me.
We headed back out to the ship, and by the time we got there, the ship had started to take a big list to starboard. And when they saw us, the life rafts, they were trying to inflate them on deck. Some of them were blowing away up the harbour, cartwheeling up the harbour.
at this stage, the lower end of the boat was only a few feet above the water.
And then we could see people jumping in the water, so we thought we'd try and go to some of these people, but as soon as they got in the water, they were swept away over to the eastern shore.
I just found myself just sitting on this piece of wood with this elderly gentleman hanging onto the side of it. I tried to help him. I was just too young. Basically just let go and he went under.
Halfway down, Maureen caught her foot underneath the capstan. She couldn't get it out.
A guy comes along and he said, "Oh, can I take your little girl and put her into a lifeboat?" And I said, "Yeah." And she didn't want to go. And I smacked her butt and told her she was a naughty girl and she was to go. Then a steward came along and I said, "Would he take Gordy?" And he said no. He said he didn't want to because he said, "He'll die with me, I can't swim." And I said, "Well, he'll die with me because I'm pregnant and can't swim." And so he did take him, and I could hear him screaming and screaming and screaming. And he jumped over the side with him into the water, and I could still hear him screaming. And a little bit later, stewards helped me, and I slid down and went over the side, and I could still hear Gordy screaming. And then all of a sudden he stopped. And I sort of knew he'd gone.
I got off and the ship was so far tipped over that she didn't have to jump or anything. The rail was right down in the sea, so you just climbed over a little rail, you know, about 3 feet high.
Try as we might, we just couldn't get her foot free from the capstan. And eventually, in desperation, still with one hand on this other, on the rope, I wasn't going to leave that go. And I gave a desperate yank, and her foot came free.
And someone handed me a baby, I don't know where from or where to, so I handed it in to my friend who was in the raft.
Someone said to me, "Throw her in and then jump." So I picked Maureen up and I threw her into the boat.
While we were getting away from the boat, there was a cry from on the top deck, and I looked up and there was this crewman yelling out "catch," I presume, or something like that, and then he threw this parcel. It was white, and as it came towards us, the Wahine went that way, our boat went that way, and the gulf widened and the parcel went straight down between us, and I saw it was a shawl with a baby in, and it just went straight down, and I never saw it surface again.